Imagine a man standing behind the cold steel bars of a Florida prison. Imagine him counting the days pass, one by one, days that eventually turn into years, years that quietly calcify into decades. Now imagine this. He is innocent, and every night, as the lights go out and the sound of clanging gates fades, he is left with only one thing: the truth that nobody believed. This is the story of James Joseph Richardson, a father whose entire world collapsed in a single afternoon in 1967, a man accused of murdering his 7 children, a crime so monstrous that the community did not question whether he did it, only why he did it. For most people, justice is a pillar, a promise. For James, it became a weapon used against him. Today, we're going to walk through that story. Not the short version you see on documentaries, but the full, brutal, suffocating account of how one man lost his life, his family, and his future to a miscarriage of justice so catastrophic that it still echoes through Florida's legal history. This is not just a case. It is a warning. The sun rose like it always did in Arcadia, Florida, slow, humid, and heavy with the smell of orange groves and distant rain. Arcadia was small, tight-knit, the kind of place where everyone knew your face even if they didn't know your name. For James Richardson, that morning wasn't supposed to be extraordinary. He woke before dawn, like he always did, preparing for a day of work picking fruit. His wife, Annie Mae, helped dress their children, 7 of them, ages ranging from 2 to 8. A full house, a loud house, a house constantly in motion. But to James, that chaos was life. It was a joy. It was for a purpose. Before leaving for work, James walked to the kitchen, touched each child's head gently, and kissed Annie Mae goodbye. Nothing felt unusual. No omen. No intuition whispering that by sunset, tragedy would strike with violence that defied comprehension. Because by the end of that day, every one of those children would be dead, and James would be accused of killing them. While James and Annie Mae worked in the groves, the children were left under the care of a babysitter, Bessie Reese, a 60-year-old neighbor who lived next door. Reese was known as quiet, somewhat strange, the kind of person who kept to herself. People described her as helpful but distant. What very few knew, because it wasn't public at the time, was that she had a history of mental illness and a far darker history that would only come to light decades later. But on that October day, she was simply the woman who agreed to watch the Richardson children while their parents earned a day's wages. At around noon, she fed them lunch, rice, beans, hamburgers left in the refrigerator. Not long after eating, each child began to vomit violently. Their bodies convulsed. Pain spread rapidly through them, and then they began to die, one by one, within hours. By evening, the entire Richardson household was silent. Tragedy tears communities apart. It also forces them to look for answers, and sometimes to look for villains. And Arcadia found one quickly. Within hours, police arrived. They searched the home and quickly discovered something they believed to be damning: a container of pesticide called parathion, stored in a shed outside. Parathion was common in farm communities, used for killing insects, but it was deadly. Even a small amount could kill a child. To investigators, the narrative wrote itself. The children were poisoned. There was poison on the property. The father must have done it. No forensic analysis. No fingerprints. No proof he ever touched the substance. Just an assumption. And assumptions can be deadly. James wasn't just grieving. He was shattered. Imagine losing not just one child, not 2, but 7. All at once. All violently. When police brought him in for questioning, he was still wearing the same clothes he had worn to the groves that morning. They were soaked in sweat, dirt, and tears. But grief doesn't protect you. It makes you vulnerable. Officers pushed him relentlessly. Why did you do it? Why would a father kill his own children? What were you planning? James answered every question the same way. I didn't do anything. I love my kids. I loved every one of them. But to investigators, that wasn't enough. A narrative had already formed. And when narratives form, evidence becomes secondary. The prosecution's case was built not on science, not on facts, but on insinuation and convenient witnesses. They claimed James had taken out life insurance policies on his children. He needed money. He planned the murders. In reality, those policies were nothing more than a door-to-door salesman's promotional pamphlets. A pitch, not actual insurance. No policies, no payouts, nothing binding. But at trial, prosecutors twisted them into proof of motive. Next came the witnesses, jailhouse informants who claimed James had confessed to them. Many of these men later admitted they lied in exchange for reduced sentences. But in 1967, their words were enough. The jury never heard that. No poison residue was found on James. No fingerprints connected him to the pesticide. He had been at work when the children were poisoned. The babysitter had been the only adult with the children. She had access to the food. None of it mattered, because once a community decides you're guilty, innocence becomes irrelevant. The trial was swift. Too swift. It lasted less than a week. When the jury returned, they avoided looking at James. Some later said they didn't want to see a child killer. They didn't want to look into the eyes of someone the prosecutor had painted as a monster. The verdict: guilty. The recommended sentence: death. James fainted when he heard it, not because he feared for his life, but because he realized nobody would ever know the truth. Death row is not just a place, it's a slow unspooling of the soul. James spent his days in a small, windowless cell, knowing that at any moment, the state could decide his execution date. Every footstep in the hallway triggered panic. Every guard who approached his cell sent fear coursing through him. He prayed, not for himself, but for the truth to survive him. But the execution never came. Legal issues forced the state to commute his sentence to life imprisonment. To some, that was mercy. To James, it was a life sentence for a crime he didn't commit. A different kind of death. Years passed. Then more years. James aged, slowly but painfully. His hair grayed. His voice weakened. His family shattered. Annie Mae, the mother of his children, initially defended him fiercely. But grief changes people. Trauma isolates. Their marriage collapsed under weight no human relationship could withstand. James was alone. And outside the prison walls, the world moved on. Arcadia forgot the case. Florida forgot the case. America forgot the case. But one person didn't, and she was about to change everything. In the 1980s, a local journalist began digging through old cases of wrongful conviction. When she reached the Richardson case, she found inconsistencies so glaring they nearly stopped her breath. But the biggest revelation? The babysitter, Bessie Reese, had confessed to poisoning multiple people across her lifetime. She had allegedly confessed to poisoning her husband, several children in unrelated cases, and the Richardson children. These confessions had been known to officials for years, but hidden, ignored, or dismissed. Reese was in a mental institution when the journalist tracked her down. When asked about the Richardson children, she said, "They shouldn't have died. It wasn't their time. I'm the one who fed them." It was the moment everything cracked open. Attorneys, journalists, and civil rights activists rallied. They filed appeals. They brought the case to national attention. They forced the courts to confront what had happened. And in October 1989, 22 years after his conviction, the courts reversed the sentence. James was free. Or rather, he was released. Because freedom is not the same as justice. He walked out of prison into a world where his children were long dead. His marriage was over. His youth was gone. His health was deteriorated. And the man he used to be had been buried under years of trauma. When reporters asked James how he felt, he said, "I'm happy to be out, but I don't think I'll ever be free." And he was right. He struggled with PTSD, anxiety, depression, homelessness, lack of compensation, constant media pressure, a world that had moved on without him. He tried to rebuild. But how do you rebuild when every foundation has been stolen? Florida fought for years against giving him compensation, despite taking 25 years of his life. His innocence wasn't enough. The state wanted to protect itself. And so, once again, the system that wronged him stood in his way. James eventually won a civil settlement, but money doesn't fix damage that deep. He spent the rest of his life trying to heal, but injustice has a way of carving scars that never fully fade. He died in 2012, at the age of 96. And to the end, he spoke about one thing: his children, not the case, not the injustice, not the years he lost, just the children he loved, and the memory that stayed with him through every sleepless night on death row. The story of James Richardson is not just a tragedy. It is a lesson. It teaches that justice can fail, communities can rush to judgment, evidence can be twisted, truth can be ignored, innocent people can lose everything. And most importantly, injustice doesn't die when a man walks free. It lingers in every year taken from him. It lives on in the lives he never got to live. James Richardson survived prison, but he never recovered from what was stolen.